The Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum is closing for a major renovation. So I have come for a special tour to take one last look at the museum's original configuration. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is one of the most famous landmarks in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was originally constructed in 1909 as one of the first ever auto racing tracks. The Speedway's construction was spearheaded by 4 Indianapolis businessmen: Carl Fisher, who was the original owner, as well as James Allison, Arthur Newby, and F.H. Wheeler. The Speedway is an official National Historic Landmark. There's the iconic pagoda of the Speedway. Back in 1913, they built one that looked just like a Japanese pagoda. There were a few variations of the pagoda structure before the giant modern one. I like the old ones better. This museum building, located within the 2-mile-long racetrack, opened in 1976, and it has not changed all too much since then. The museum closed in November of 2023 for an extensive 18-month-long renovation, and is expected to reopen with many new exhibit designs and spaces in April of 2025, just in time for that year's Indy 500 festivities. On the tour, they did present about the upcoming changes, and overall they're pretty exciting. This will be an $89 million project to revamp the problematic building, which will include replacing the HVAC system to better preserve the vehicles and artifacts. The exterior will largely stay the same. They're planning to shorten the flagpoles so you can read the lettering, but this classic look should remain. There is a big skylight in the center of the museum building, and of course high levels of natural light is not good for historic artifacts, so that skylight is actually going to be replaced by a screen of the sky. They are keeping the terrazzo flooring throughout the museum, which is great. Now inside, things will really be changed up. The primary gallery spaces will look significantly different. There will be an exhibit called Gasoline Alley, which will highlight the early history and changes of the track. While there is currently only one level of gallery space, they will be adding a mezzanine gallery, and also open up part of the basement for exhibit space. They are also planning an up-to-standard temporary exhibition space so they can get traveling exhibits in the future. Additionally, there will be many modern updates with interactive displays, like a pit stop challenge. There will also be further inclusion of screens, ambient noises, and modernized lighting, which hopefully will all turn out well. There is also a plan for creating a new restoration garage, which visitors will have an opportunity to tour. As much as I like the museum how it has more or less always looked, I think they have a promising plan to renovate the museum for the future. It will be bigger and hopefully better. Now let's take one more look around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum as it has appeared for decades. The main big gallery room will be changed significantly, and cars will no longer be displayed in a jumble like this. Most of these vehicles did win the Indy 500 at some point in its 112-year history, being the premier car race in the world. Winning teams have been less likely to give up their victorious vehicles in recent years, so I worry the collection may be a bit lacking in this era. I think they should go ahead and mandate that the champion car by default goes to the museum collection, but that's just me. This vehicle won the 4th Indy 500 in 1914 with a record average speed of 82 miles per hour. There is a pig on the 1952 winner, which was the last dirt track type car to win the 500. The pink Zinc here won the 1955 Indy 500. This Roadster won in '64. Here are the champions of the 1970s, like Al Unser's 1970 and 71 cars. Gordon Johncock won by an incredibly thin margin of 0.16 seconds in 1982 in this car. This car here was the champion of the Centennial Indy 500 race in 2011, won last second by Dan Weldon in the first instance of a winner only leading in the final lap of the 200. Here's the evolution of driver helmets. The museum does plan to display more non-race car artifacts in the next iteration. Carl Fisher was the father and original owner of the Speedway. He also spearheaded the Lincoln and Dixie highways and developed Miami Beach, Florida. This portrait of Fisher hung in his lavish Miami Beach estate. Fisher originally made his fortune by creating Presto lights, the first effective headlight system for cars, which was powered by acetylene gas compressed into canisters like this. These would be fitted into the running boards of cars and delivered to the headlight system through tubing. There is a fantastic temporary display featuring the cars of the original Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. This is actually the second version of the museum. The first Speedway Museum was opened in 1956 in a small building outside the track, and they originally displayed 6 cars. The 13 original vehicles displayed in that building from 1956 to 1976 are all on display in this room. They even did Speedway tours back then for 25 cents. It costs a lot more now. And they got to go on the track with a VW bus. That's way cool. Let's start at the beginning with the most famous car in the collection, the original champion. This is the Marmon Wasp, which won the first Indy 500 race in 1911. Race car driving was even more grueling and dangerous work back in those days, especially for the mechanics who would usually ride along to keep things running and keep an eye on approaching cars. The driver of the Marmon Wasp, Ray Haroon, achieved his victory after nearly 7 hours of circling the track, and it was controversial because he was the only one without a mechanic, as he instead used a newfangled rear view mirror. Some even credit him with inventing the rear view mirror. This is the Samson Special from 1939, which utilized a supercharged V16 engine. That 1938 Maserati Boyle Special has a long history here at the Speedway. It won back-to-back races with driver Wilbur Shaw in 1939 and 1940, and it continued to be used in several post-war races until 1951. It became one of the 6 original cars at the original museum. Here is the 1932 Miller Hart Special, which was raced in the Indy 500 in 1932 and won, and it continued racing the 500 until 1947. This is a Cummins race car with an inline 6-cylinder diesel engine, which was manufactured by Cummins out of Columbus, Indiana in 1952. The 1925 Junior 8 Miller was the first front-drive car to run at the Indy 500 and participated in several races throughout the 1920s and 30s. This is awesome! Carl Fisher's 1905 Premier race car. Before building the Speedway, Fisher was heavily involved in early race car driving, which was dominated by European builds at that time. Premier built that massive engine for Fisher, and he put on a body clearly designed to have minimal weight besides the engine. He even cut 200 holes into the frame. Fisher raced this vehicle on the track at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, and it had an average speed of 57 miles per hour. Jimmy Murphy won the 1921 French Grand Prix with this doozy. That was the only instance when an American driver or car ever won the Grand Prix, accomplished with this Duesenberg Special built right here in Indiana. Murphy returned to Indiana and won the following year's Indy 500 with the car. The 1948 Blue Crown Special achieved back-to-back victories in 1947 and 48 for Maury Rose. This 1950s Fireboy never won the 500. It was runner-up one time, but after its racing days were over, Firestone bought it to test tires, and then Strategic Air Command used it to test Boeing 202 gas turbine engines and Benedict's aircraft brakes. For decades, the track was entirely composed of brick. It was replaced by asphalt in 1937. There is still a line of original brick which marks the starting point of the races here. This 1947 car is the result of a deadly test by Gulf Oil. After they gave up on it, the remaining chassis was obtained by industrialist Preston Tucker, who was able to improve the design and get into a couple Indy 500 races. The first motor event at the Speedway in 1909 was a motorcycle race, and this is one of the bikes that was in that first ever race. And that is the 1912 National, driven by Joe Dawson in the second Indy 500 race. A different driver had led 196 out of the 200 laps when they had mechanical issues, so its driver and technician hopped out and started pushing towards the finish line, thinking they were on the final lap. Then Dawson passed them in this vehicle to take the victory. There are also some rather distinctive trophies that were on display in the first museum. The Stark and Wetzel Trophy was awarded from the 50s to the 70s to the Indy 500's Rookie of the Year. Those gold medals were awarded to Jimmy Murphy for winning the European Grand Prix. Again, the only American to ever do so. That one has antler horns on it. From 1924 to 1936, the winner of the Indy 500 would be crowned. Once the crown stopped being used, the winner got to drink milk instead. Another temporary setup on display is titled Our Collection, Your Favorites. The museum surveyed its members and visitors to select 15 favorite cars in the collection, and these are some of the winners. Mario Andretti drove this 1972 Viceroy Special VPJ1. This unique race car was designed for the Indy 500 in 1964 by Smokey Yunick, who was a famous car designer. However, it did not qualify. Jimmy Bryan drove this 1957 Kuzma Roadster to victory at the first Monza 500 race. In the 1920s, major car manufacturers did not really produce race cars, so specialist engineers like Harry Miller would engineer cars like these. Harry Miller also built this Ford V8 race car in 1935 for Edsel Ford. This car was entered into an Indy 500 race, but it did not go well. The driver went out with steering issues, and the Ford company stayed away from racing for 2 decades after that. That is a 1952 Ferrari Special Type 375. And there's an Uno sponsored race car. These were some cool exhibits to end on. So I will miss the current museum, but I am excited for the updates. Overall, I do think they will be improvements and make this a better museum, so I look forward to coming back after it's completed. Again, they plan to reopen by the 2025 Indy 500. I hope you enjoyed this final look at the old Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. If you did, then please like the video, share it, and subscribe to my channel. Also take a look at my other videos featuring auto museums and shows, along with other historic sites and unique attractions in Indiana, as well as across the United States and Europe. Thanks for watching!